On today's show, missing on Quinn Hughes didn't slow the Capitals down. It pushed them straight toward Rasmus Andersson.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about Tom Wilson and Brad Marchand. Bitter rivals, 2 tough guys. As it turns out, in a bonding moment, those two have more in common than most would think. A bit later, we'll talk about how Justin Sourdif is changing the Capitals' plans. Listen, a long shot, I was going to say, starting a camp. And when I found out the Capitals traded for him and how he started out the season as a 4th-line right wing, now a 2nd-line center, he's making a case that he belongs. But just to get it going here, talking about more buzz out there about Rasmus Andersson this time and the connection that you can draw that the Capitals are definitely in on a defender as they swung and missed on Quinn Hughes. And now the rumor mill is churning, and the connections between the Capitals and the Calgary Flames, Rasmus Andersson. And this emanates from multiple sources, but more recently I heard it from Jimmy Murphy, who is one of the hosts of the Sick podcast. And you take a look at a Calgary team that has been playing a bit later as of late, but I still think big picture will probably offload some assets. I guess it depends on how far their good fortune extends, but it has not been a great start, big picture, for Calgary. And why is this even of interest of the Capitals? Like defender, big name defender Quinn Hughes, and now Rasmus Andersson. It's a couple reasons. John Carlson is in a contract year. Trevor Van Riemsdyk is in a contract year. And even if they come to terms with John Carlson and they sign him to an extension, it cannot continue to go on that he's playing these mega minutes, if you will, that at some point the rubber meets the road. Take a look at Alex Ovechkin, for example, that and all that he's accomplished, that we have seen his minutes decrease. So let's dive into that in the first segment of today's show, because the Capitals being linked to Rasmus Andersson isn't about one player. It's ultimately proof that the front office believes the blue line still needs a serious upgrade, and they're not afraid of the cost. That I like where their head's at. You know, the Quinn Hughes thing, that was definitely swinging for the fences. Again, Chris Patrick has not connected with any of those swings as of yet. But and I don't know if there's any smoke to this fire. This is just all the rumor mill churning out there. But, you know, it would be an interesting thing to think about here, because let's zoom out for a second, because this matters. For the Capitals, you don't accidentally get connected to 2 names like Quinn Hughes and then Rasmus Andersson. The Quinn Hughes one is substantiated. We know the Capitals were all in. Are the Capitals in behind the scenes on Rasmus Andersson? I think that's not coincidence. That's a pattern. The Capitals made it very clear internally and around the league, they're hunting a defenseman who changes how this team looks in playoff hockey. I think that maybe they know that they're pretty far apart on John Carlson. I don't know that for sure, but and maybe, like I said to start off the show, it's just because they realize that he can not continue to be that minute monster. And Andersson is interesting because he represents realism. He's not a highlight reel defender. He's not a jersey selling star, but he plays big minutes. Underline, boldface type there, big minutes against top lines every single night, and he doesn't wilt under pressure. And ultimately, coaches trust him, teammates trust him. And that's not the type of defenseman that suddenly becomes priceless when the games slow down. And I don't think that Calgary wants to part with him. I think that they just see the lay of the land. And again, they've had a little bit of bump here as of late, but I don't know big picture if they have, a really bright future this season. So oftentimes they try to offload assets for the bigger picture. You take a look at the Quinn Hughes thing again, that looked like a slam dunk for the Wild, but the Vancouver Canucks have benefited from that as well. So I think the Capitals and the Calgary Flames, well, the Flames would like to benefit from some of their young and rising stars. And there's also common understanding around the league that Calgary is flirting with a pivot, not a full teardown, but a recognition that certain veterans might bring back real value before contracts expire. And Andersson, well, he fits that bill, sits right in the danger zone for the Flames. But for the Capitals, the appeal is obvious. Right shot defenseman. He can play first or second pair, doesn't need sheltering, doesn't panic under pressure. He checks a lot of boxes. And to be clear here, I didn't really think going into this season that the Capitals would be all in on defenders. The holes with the forward group, that seems to be more apparent, but just what we're hearing out there. And again, this one has not been substantiated other than just the rumor mill out there. But it's fodder, and these some of these guys are connected with inside the industry that they want to upgrade the blue line. And the indicators, like I said, about Carlson, TVR, and the like, maybe they're further apart than we think. And yeah, the risk is real, a rental type situation. That's the part everyone jumps to. The what if he walks? What if you give up a first? Those kind of things. And I'll say it plainly here. This is my opinion. The Capitals team is built to accept that risk. We cannot continue to go on like, I don't want to make this move. I don't want to make that move because I might risk the bigger picture. Look at the bowl, the jolt, the boost that the Minnesota Wild got from acquiring a Quinn Hughes. They were trending in the right direction, but really put some fire underneath of them when that trade was secured. And the Capitals need a Quinn Hughes-esque type move. And, you don't have Alex Ovechkin at 40 years old and play the long game forever. That we got to protect him. There's not going to be a tear down to the studs rebuild while he's here. And the Capitals don't need to do that. There's a lot of good pieces in place, but what's apparent as of late that they need a boost. And you don't ask John Carlson to keep carrying massive minutes without help. It's not sustainable. Chychrun has taken on a bigger role, Matt Roy, these kind of guys, but it's still at the end of the day, John Carlson playing big minutes. And, you don't swing and miss on Quinn Hughes and then say, well, actually, you know what? We're good. We don't need anybody else. It's an indicator. It's a tell. Even if the Rasmus Andersson isn't substantiated, the fact that they were all in on an upper echelon defender tells you everything you need to know. If Andersson is available and the Capitals allowed into the conversation, that's a front office saying, we know what time it is. That we need an upgrade. And I don't think that the Capitals need to make one move. I don't think that, making a swing for a Rasmus Andersson is the end. Like I said, I still think they need to address the forward position. And but it's not just players, it's systems. But a true tell, I will say, that they're all in on Quinn Hughes. And now the rumor mill is just churning out this gossip about Rasmus Andersson. I think there is change coming ahead. I spoke about it in yesterday's show. And the thing of it is, I don't think it's just going to be a little bit of change. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Tom Wilson and Brad Marchand. Two tough guys that have more in common than you'd think. I'll break it all down straight ahead. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting from FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to tilt, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you stay in the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. So do what I do. Open up the FanDuel app when the Commanders or Ravens are playing. Put a little bit of money down on those games. All of a sudden, they got that much more exciting. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On Capitals the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it to the next level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Capitals with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more for all just $5 a month or $50 a year. And if you're a true diehard Locked On Capitals fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with me, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount to the Locked On Capitals merch store. Just check out the link in the show notes. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Cap. So in segment 2 here, we're talking Tom Wilson. We're talking Brad Marchand. On the outside, I guess I would think that those two guys hated each other. But as it turns out, those two tough guys have more in common than you'd think, and a bit of a relationship, a friendship that Elliot Friedman was doing an interview and was talking with Tom Wilson. Both players were in the orientation for Team Canada, and Marchand and Wilson talking and comparing notes about who's been fined more and, these kind of things, and just two agitators in the league. And it's interesting how two guys that I think on the outside that you would perceive as guys that hate each other, I think actually could make fast friends. So let's talk about a lighter story here in segment number 2 here. And Wilson, part of the Capitals DNA, the toughness, and finally his moment to shine. And I think back on the opportunities missed for Tom Wilson. I'm thinking Four Nations face-off, those kind of things that when the team was struggling, Canada, that if you could open up a can of Tom Wilson, a number 43, and unleash him onto the ice, I think that could be an absolute game changer. And he's a guy, a lot like Logan Thompson, that cannot be ignored. Their body of work speaks for itself. And but the funny story, the Tom Wilson connection with Brad Marchand, it's funny because it's just two players, and it's the league understanding how two guys have so much in common. Because on the surface, it's amusing. Two of the most hated players in the league, like I said, joking about fines, suspensions, and an Instagram poll crowning the NHL's ultimate villain. And, knowing these players, never have meeting either one of those players, but just seeing them in interviews and those kind of things, I think they relish that kind of role as the ultimate villain of the NHL. And, pretty apropos, I guess I got to say, because, with Marchand doing whatever he needs to do, the lick and the Tom Wilson and the Panarin and the history that they have. And just thinking back on Wilson, that, them telling him when he was earlier in the league, you better clean up your act or you're not going to have a future in the NHL. How he has gone from a guy that leaned heavily into physicality, still will if the moment calls for it, but, realizes he's better served being on the ice. That he has come full circle, a mature Tom Wilson. And you take a look at what Marchand has meant for the Panthers, right? That it was kind of, a lot of people perceived that he was going to go out as a Bruin for life, but not the case. And even me thinking about it, before he went to Florida, how great would that have been for Brad Marchand on the Capitals? And right away, a polarizing figure. Hearing from many people online, from Twitter and YouTube, like, absolutely not. Just take those words out of your mouth. I think Tom Wilson has that reputation around the league as well, that Tom Wilson is joining this or that team, and their fan base might be saying no chance, just be based on reputation and what kind of players these players are. But beneath all of that, but beneath all of the bravado, beneath all of the puff chest, there's something real here. Around the league, it's common knowledge that Wilson and Marchand have lived under that same microscope their entire careers. Every hit gets replayed because of reputation. And, every scrum becomes a headline. Every mistake turns into a referendum on their character. We know who number 43 is. Proudly have his jersey behind me each and every episode because of who he is. I see who Tom Wilson is. And because, I cover the team, watch the games, and I understand who he is. Is he a tough guy? For sure. But there's not, one of the other 31 other teams out in the league that would not kill to have a guy like Tom Wilson on their team. The toughness and the goal scoring, because you can just strike those words from your mouth that he's just a tough guy, a goon, because his stats back up what kind of player he is. I'm not just talking PIM minutes. I'm talking about goals. And, where he stands in the hierarchy, I guess you could say, of the Capitals, the heir apparent as the captain. And yet they keep winning. Both of them, Wilson and Marchand, two key contributors that we like to sweep the toughness, the physicality under the rug as something that's not important inside the NHL anymore. I'm here to tell you it is, but not just that. They keep playing heavy minutes. They keep being leaned on by coaches in big moments. They keep showing up when the games get ugly. How many times have we seen that happen? And to be clear here, I would like to see a bit more physicality. You take a look at the game against Minnesota. I know that Duhaime did his best to try to get into a fight, but Tom Wilson, that's what isn't spoke of is, fighting isn't sometimes sticking up for yourself or your teammate. It's about trying to shift the momentum. And I'm not saying a dirty hit, but, if the Wild player was willing to, maybe a fight would have swung in the balance, the momentum for the Capitals or the Winnipeg game or the Carolina game. I guess I could go on here for a little bit here. But we need something to happen. And a Tom Wilson in any given moment, whether he's scoring goals, whether he's finding the back of the net, same goes for Marchand and his history in Boston and now in Florida, the two guys that often do the dirty thing, right? They do the things that many people don't like to talk about. But Wilson is ultimately having a cleaner season so far. Isn't him losing his edge. It's him understanding where the line is, that there are other tough guys on the team that can take on that role. He's putting up big goals, right? Tom Wilson he's knocking them out of the park in the goal scoring department. Have Duhaime, if he's in there, have him fight. Or if a Dylan McElrath is in there, have them be in there. And then have Tom Wilson fight if he has to. But, I think that he's at a point in his career where maybe it's not so much the case. Because you take a look at him, still walking right along. He's still intimidating. He's still emotionally tilting games. He's just doing it smarter. And that's when you talk about, big picture and where this Capitals team wants to be, because the Capitals, trying to they're not trying to sand down their identity. They're trying to support it. And that's why I talked about in segment one that they're still, I think, trying to bolster this team, as evident by Quinn Hughes and the rumor mill out there about Rasmus Andersson. They want guys who don't get rattled when things get loud. Wilson is that for Washington. Marchand is that guy for Florida. They could be those guys for Canada. Guys who don't shy away when whistles disappear. There are a lot of forwards out there that can score goals, but they could never do what those guys do because playoff hockey doesn't reward plight teams. They reward teams that do whatever it takes
to win the games. The guys with the physical flair. It rewards teams that are comfortable being uncomfortable. And Wilson lives in that area. Thinking before, Hathaway was that kind of guy. Duhaime, McElrath, go back, Erskine, all of these guys played with a physical flair. All guys that had their physicality was very important to this team because Wilson represents that better than almost anyone on the roster. And the fact he's still setting the tone is ultimately why he's in the conversation for being the future captain when Ovi hangs it up. Without crossing lines is a big reason this team still believes in itself. So a great moment, a great lighter story talking about Wilson and Marchand, two big players for Canada, two big players for their respective teams. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Justin Sourdif. And seeing him taking on a bigger role with the Capitals changes everything. I'll just talk about it straight ahead. The holidays are amazing, but they can also get overwhelming fast. Travel, gifts, parties, year-end expenses. It's really to lose track of your money this time of year. And that's exactly why Monarch has become such a game changer for me. Now, listen, I love Christmas more than anyone. I love giving gifts to my friends and family, but I also want to walk away from the holidays with some money left in my account. And that's why Monarch is so important for me and will be for you as well. If you want to keep your finances under control this holiday season, you need to be using Monarch. Rated Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025, Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, simple dashboard. The holiday spending category can become a lifesaver. You can see exactly what's left in your gift and travel budget in real time in minutes. You can check your net worth, link all your accounts, and keep track of your contributions before deadline. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in the final segment of today's show, we talk about Justin Sourdif. One of the moves that was made this past summer, actually the two real moves that were made, Declan Chisholm and Justin Sourdif, and the feeling was, what does Chris Patrick and the amateur staff know that we do not? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I had not heard Justin Sourdif's name before. A guy that only played a couple games with the Panthers, played primarily in the AHL. And the feeling was we wanted more, and we got Justin Sourdif. Well, as it turns out, he has been a good addition. He initially started as the fourth line right wing. We have also seen him play at the second line center position, of course, between Pro and Wilson. And all things considered, has done a pretty good job. It'll be interesting come March when PLD returns exactly where Justin Sourdif fits in. I guess it depends on what kind of movement takes place. Because up the middle, you know that you also have options in McMichael, LaPierre, Dowd, Strome, these kind of guys that what will this team look like? And ultimately, what will it mean for Sourdif in PLD's return? So let's talk about that in the final segment here. Because Sourdif is forcing the conversation. Because, you take a look at it. He's not just surviving at center. He's actively changing how the Caps think about their depth down the middle. And, I take a look at it, LaPierre, that, you'd point to some advanced metrics that he's maybe playing better than the goal scoring is concerned. But still, I think they tried to retread that tire in. We don't want to have too many reclamation projects or too many players that aren't performing based on the potential of what can be. And that's what I'm talking about there. That, you take a look at LaPierre, you take a look at Milano, who understands not a center, but, there are a lot of maybes. And I think that when you take a look at Sourdif, I think he's solidifying his spot as an option, depending how the roster is constructed come, March when PLD returns. Because let's really dig into this one, because this isn't a small story. Inside the organization, it's been understood for a while that Sourdif always viewed himself as a center first. And so did Carbs. I know he started, like I said, fourth line right wing, but when given the opportunity, I think excelled. Has great bursts of speed. For a young guy, sees the ice very well. And that belief never went away for Sourdif, and I think Carberry, even when his path took longer than expected. Development isn't linear, and he wasn't flashy. But when the opportunity arose, when Carberry said, we're putting him in at center, and then you find out, fourth line center? No, he's going to be playing second line center, a spot that was taken by PLD before he was injured. And when opportunity knocked, he didn't hesitate and has played very well. Since stepping in a larger role, Sourdif has quietly been excellent in the details, and coaches obsess over details, and ultimately why he has stayed where he's been. Puck battles, defensive positioning, face-offs, and tempo. He's not cheating for offense, and he's not panicking when plays break down. And, kind of surprising in a lot of ways. A guy, like I said, that does not have a tremendous amount of NHL experience before this season doesn't look like he doesn't belong. He doesn't look like he's overwhelmed by the situation. And that's huge for a young center that's trying to solidify his spot on the roster. And it's also widely understood that his confidence has grown, and it's been apparent in every game. You can see it in how he attacks the puck, how he supports his defensemen, how he holds on to plays just a beat longer instead of defaulting to the safe position, that he doesn't have that feeling like I need to quick get rid of the puck because, you shoot it. I'm not going to shoot it. You shoot it. And then there's the face-off work. Winning draws consistently, especially against top competition, is one of the fastest ways to earn trust. And I think that he has done the things that he needs to do to earn trust. And trust is a currency in this league. If, guys like Spencer can trust him in big minutes, then he's going to continue to keep playing. Because once a coach trusts you in the middle of the ice, everything else opens up. That, we've seen Connor McMichael at center. We have seen LaPierre at center. And, varying degrees of success. It's interesting and also a tell, ultimately, that Spencer Carberry trusts Justin Sourdif at center. So here's my take. This isn't a temporary solution. Even when the lineup gets healthier, Sourdif has earned the right to stay in meaningful minutes. He's not just filling a hole. He's showing the Caps have found something real without paying for it on the trade market big term. I know that we gave up, some draft picks there, but ultimately you got to give up something to get something. And as it turns out, has been a good addition. Has he been great? I'm not going to go ahead and say great, but he has exceeded my expectations so far. Because when you look at him, he's not loud, he's not flashy, but he's doing the hardest job in hockey quietly, and he's doing it rather well. Again, I point to this, that we need upgrades, and where will he fit, once those upgrades happen? Because I have a hunch, I have a premonition that we're going to see those upgrades sooner than later. But big picture, Sourdif has done a good job. I expect that game to even grow and get better and better as time goes on. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. Ultimately, you are what makes this show successful. And if you need a last-minute holiday gift or someone keeps asking what you want, Make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. Ad-free episodes of this show, exclusive Discord server access, and more. Subscriptions can be found through the link in the show notes. For those of you on the video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.